called Exploring Canada-South Africa Co-Productions. I think on day 3 or 4, depending on when you arrived, we should be well beyond exploring, and I know many of you have had lots and lots of B2B meetings. You're identifying ideas and taking it further than just the tentative nature, which is suggested by the title. So we'll be doing a deeper dive into how we do co-productions with Canada. I don't think I need to really answer the question of why co-productions with Canada. We have, as you know, a real powerhouse industry. In South African terms, it's probably worth about 240 billion rand per year in Canada. It employs 250,000 Canadians, and it's more than half from its international productions and events like Toronto International Film Festival, which began this week. Now, I know you're all here meeting our very strong delegation. It has 30 members, 23 companies, 6 Canadian government organizations that support the industry. I know you're all here to make the kind of co-productions that will make money, that make economic sense, but you're not just here for that, I'm sure. As we've all been hearing and experiencing here, it's also the themes that you want to talk about, the stories that inspire people. And those stories, going back to the very first co-production between South Africa and Canada, and South Africa's first co-production agreement was in fact with Canada, going back to 1997, those themes are things like diversity and inclusion and gender equity. And gender equity was particularly emphasized to me this morning when I was the sole member of my gender at a meeting about women in entertainment. About 300 or 400 powerful women were there explaining their stories as women, how they've overcome the barriers, especially the black women who were in the audience have special challenges, particularly in Canada where they're a minority. But it was really inspiring to hear that. So that theme of diversity, of inclusion, has been there from the outset, and I know you'll want to continue it. It actually began with a film, or rather a documentary miniseries called Molo Fish in 1997. And Molo Fish, 2 of the companies that produced that and won a Gemini for it are represented here today. But Molo Fish was about a young man, he was 18, he was arrested in the anti-apartheid struggle, which mercifully came to an end 30 years ago next year in 2024. He was arrested, he escaped to Botswana, then Zimbabwe, and finally to Canada. So it's that tale, but it kind of set the tone for what we've been doing in co-productions ever since, and I'm sure we'll continue as you all start to form new partnerships. And when we talk about partnerships, we're actually talking about equality. We're talking about diversity. That's what the meaning of a partnership or even a co-production really is. So in addition to inner city films and Career Films, who won that Gemini Award for that documentary series, Molo Fish, we've also got the Canadian Media Producers Association, which is Canada's trade association for independent producers. It represents Canadian companies engaged in the development, the production, and distribution of English language content for TV, feature films, and digital media channels. We've got, of course, from South Africa, the Independent Producers Association, IPO, which is CMPA's South African counterpart. Will provide insights on creating sustainable content here. And later on, without spilling the beans, we have a little marriage ceremony going on at our booth at E12 over there. And I would encourage you all to come by and see what we've managed to achieve. So please do come by once this session is over. I'd like to now turn it over to our moderator, Dorothy Alexandre, who is a born and bred Montrealaise. She is a seasoned communicator. She's hosted content production in digital and TV. She's a fierce advocate of authentic, strong, and diverse representation in the AV industry. She's hosted hundreds of events, conferences, and roundtables, and with a proven record of success with all manner of companies in this industry, I know she'll do a great job and you'll enjoy it very much. So over to you, Dorothy.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Cooter. So for me, it's a real pleasure to be here. I'm hosting this panel discussion. I know that most of us probably have listened to several sessions on co-productions, on how to do filmmaking and everything. So today, what we want to focus on, like Mr. Cooter said, is on co-production. When we talk about filmmaking, obviously we know that there are a lot of challenges that are posed by what? By financing, the lack of financing, should I say, or even politics. But today what we want to focus on is the creative process. How can we make sure that Canada and South Africa get the best stories out there, the most authentic stories that are related to your South African realities, our Canadian realities also. So in order to do that, we have 4 panelists. I'm going to quickly tell you who they are. So to my left, I have Alfons Adetuyi. So he's an award-winning director, producer, and he's recognized both for navigating the complexities of financing international co-productions and for producing successful cross-cultural films and television series. And like Mr. Couder said, his credit include the first official South Africa and Canada co-pro, which is called Molofish. There's also a medical drama series, Josie H., and the rom-com Love Jack, which is currently streaming on Netflix. So please have a round of applause for Alfons. Thank you, Alfons, for being here. And I have to my right, Sarolta Csete. She's a director, mentorship, and international development Canadian at the Canadian Media Producers Association, which is CMPA. So what is the CMPA? It's a national advocacy organization for independent producers, and they represent hundreds of companies engaged in the development, production, and distribution of English language content for television, cinema, and digital media channels. So Sarolta, thank you for being here. To my left, once again, from South Africa. So these are 2 Canadians, and the 2 South Africans, we have Quinton Fredericks. He's an award-winning documentary filmmaker and storyteller with more than 18 years in the film and television industry. He has pioneered one of the most innovative training and development initiatives, namely the SA Film Academy, and now it's in its 6th year of existence. He's also a former IPO co-chair and is the current IPO Exco member. So Quinton, thank you for being here also.
Thank you.
And finally, but not the least, we have the beautiful Beverley Mitchell. She's a leading South African creative development executive with decades of experience working in both the international and African media environment. She's passionate about storytelling, and she has taught narrative storytelling and story structure at various institutions. She has led writers' rooms across Africa and the Caribbean to elevate the craft of storytelling to produce high-premium African content. Beverley, welcome. And you got some fans in here. So first question, we'll start. I just want to know, how did you get into the industry and what makes you thriving today? Just like in a few seconds, because we know it's not easy, but you're still here, you're passionate about it. So how did you jump into the industry and what keeps you going? So I'll start with you, Beverley.
So 30 years ago, I was part of a group of investigative journalists who were sent into the SABC to change content on air. So that's how I ended up getting into the industry. I resigned in 1996 and met Alfons and worked on Molofish, the first official South African co-production. The reason why I stay in the industry, I'm wired that way. I've been a storyteller since I came out of my mother's womb. Yeah, I'm wired that way. Yeah.
Good. Thank you. And Sarolta?
So I've been in the industry for a little bit over 20 years, and it was all happenstance. It wasn't by plan, which I'm sure happens to a lot of people who work in this industry. I can tell you more about it after at our signing if you're interested, but what keeps me going to be as a representative of a producers association, what keeps me going is helping independent producers tell their stories and to support them both in Canada and as they develop, grow their businesses internationally.
Thank you, Sarolta. And you, Alfons?
Well, it was a long time ago, but I'll try to remember. Basically, I did a number of short films. I started doing this since high school. And then I went to college to do film in the Canadian Film Centre, which is a film school we have in Toronto. And I did a short film called Survivors that did well and won some awards and got into TIFF. So that helped really start things off. But it wasn't really until my dad took me to his village in Ondo that I really understood storytelling. You know, I listened to the elders as they went in the kind of market square and told these stories that would just sort of lift you into a different place and time. And I realized that was what I wanted to do. And then I met a South African. That really changed my life because we came back here and did a story about growing up in the townships, really, and it was a 13-hour story, and that was Molefish. So that was my kind of birth into fire here, shooting in the townships and doing this very innovative, I think, TV series.
And what keeps you going now?
Again, just wanting to be able to tell those stories like those guys did in the village, transporting people into a different place, into a different time, and sharing the emotions of those characters with an audience.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to talk more about Molefish. And for you, Quinton?
So, as a child, I grew up on the Cape Flats and in Heideveld, which is one of the areas where people of color were moved to under the Group Areas Act. And we had a cinema called Capri 1600. And they used to play these Chinese movies for 20 cents. And everybody, when we came out, everybody was a kung fu master, right? Jump off the roof and break your arm and have your mother whack you on top of it. Cut up the broomstick to make nunchucks and get another hiding for that. So, yeah, and Golden Eagle and Silver Fox were our main heroes back in the day. And I think I developed a fascination with film at that tender age. But my official introduction into the industry on a more serious note was when Bev came from Joburg to do an insert for Channel 4 on the violence between Pagat and Cor in 1996. And that's when I realized the power of the medium to actually impact people. And then I worked on another South African-Canadian co-production in 2004 called Charlie Jade with Izzy Codrin and Chris Rowland with a company called Imaginarium. And it was a sci-fi series, and it was pioneering in the sense that it was looking at using special effects at a time when it wasn't that special effects that we have now. And I think that's when the film bug bit me. And yeah, it's just been my passion. And what keeps me going is the power of the medium to actually not just entertain, but also inform, educate, and challenge paradigms and people's perceptions of the world that they live in.
Both of you used the word, the power of the medium. So this is exactly what we're going to talk. And we're going to talk about the power of partnerships, the power of strong, mutually beneficial partnerships. So in terms of the themes that we're going to talk about today, we want to touch upon the creative process. How do you build those strong relationships? What is the art of crafting powerful local stories that resonate with a global audience when you have two countries from two different continents, two different realities? We also want to talk about how do you foster impactful exchange between Canadian and South African creators, because you have people who have their own realities, their own set of tools in Canada and in South Africa. How do you mix, how do you meld both of these expertise, these experiences, culture, the skills, and then we're going to conclude. So I'll start with you, Alfons. In terms of building strong and long-lasting partnerships, what are the 2 or 3 key elements that you think are necessary for building those type of relationships in the industry? And maybe you could touch upon your own experience with Molefish, which was launched in 1997 here in South Africa.
Well, I think the most important thing is that both partners agree to tell the same story. Because what I find is when you have people coming from 2 different cultures and 2 different world views, basically, they may understand the script or the concept and the title, but they see it through 2 different eyes. And so I think it's really important for you to, with your South African or whatever international partner, to really understand and have a discussions so that you understand you're doing the same story. And for me, that meant that certainly when we were doing Molefish, I said, no, I get it, you know, the drama and all of the things happening in the different townships, and you have the colored and white and black and all. Yeah, I kind of, you know, get. And they looked at me and said, no, you don't understand. You've never been here. You have no clue. And I said, okay, because I was supposed to direct some of these episodes. So what they did was basically say, we're going to put you in a township. I think it was Eldorado Park. You're going to wear your T-shirt and jeans, and you're going to just don't talk, because then you're Canadian. Don't talk, and just listen and see the vibe. And so I had to do that for a few weeks before they even let me go back to reading the scripts, basically. And from that, I got to understand, until I did open my mouth in a few places. And then it was, you're not any color, you're Canadian, that's it, whereas before, experience the life as, I guess to me, I'm supposed to be a colored person. We don't really have that in Canada. I was never identified that way, but it just let me understand the world they came from. So then it let me go back into the story and understand the story that we were telling, as opposed to just saying this drama and let's do this scene and that scene. There was a whole thinking, So I think what's important is for you to become very familiar with and to exchange. And visiting, this is great. All the Canadians that are coming here, and I'm sure some of the South Africans coming back. So I think that's one of the important things.
And I guess it took a lot of humility, because obviously as creators, you have a set of idea. You come there maybe with your own narrative, and sometimes our narratives are biased, right? So maybe Beverley, if you want to put into, if you want to talk a little bit about that, because if you come up with your own bias or your own narratives and you're not ready to listen and shut your mouth, excuse me the word, but this is what they ask you to do in order to propel a better story. Yeah. So what do you want to say about that?
I think the most important thing when you're talking particularly to producers or filmmakers from other countries is to lose the inferiority complex that South Africans often suffer from. That we the junior and this person's more experienced, knows more than that. And to see this as a meeting point of diversity and respect each other's contributions to the project. And for me, the most important thing is the story. It's not, I often say to young filmmakers, don't think I want to do a co-production with Canada and then come up with an idea. First come up with the idea, first develop that story, and then those partnerships will come. And I really believe that everything is about story, and all your focus should be in it. And I'm very excited about this collaboration that's going to be starting to happen between the IPO and the Canadian Producers Organization, because in that way, we can begin to workshop the kind of stories, the great stories that we share. We share a lot of history with Canada that people don't even know, and they are incredible stories. Some of us have family in Canada who ran away from apartheid, and who are now Canadian, and some of them are coming back trying to find their lost black relatives, but they're white Canadians. So there's all these intricate, interesting stories. And so for me, I think the most important thing is, when you're looking at co-production, is first and foremost to say, is my story worth a co-production partnership?
Definitely. And for you, Sarolta, when you listen to this, as somebody who advocates on behalf of independent producers, what is the role of your organizations in order to make sure that producers come into an environment, especially if we come on the international level, with, I'd say, humility or that openness to other cultures, and that respect also that is deserved in Africa and elsewhere in the world?
Yeah, so I couldn't agree with you more. It's all about the story. So what our role is to create an atmosphere and an environment when people can freely exchange ideas about their projects, and it's a nurturing environment. It's an environment that really facilitates, the creative exchange, as well as, the business portion of, the financing and all of that. So that's where I see our role. It's to bring producers together.
And you're talking about exchange of expertise. Quinton, you are used to exchanging with people from other countries, for example, the United States, Canada also. So in your experience, are there any roadblocks or compromise that you had to do in order to make sure that the story falls into place and that both of you say the same story as Alfons was saying. So what are maybe one roadblock that you may have faced, and what was the solution that you put in place in order to make it work?
Yeah, I think the challenges there are multiple challenges in any co-production relationship that are not just confined to a shared value or ethos between the partners. I think there are lots of dynamics. There's the issue of people's worldview, perception, awareness and sensitivity of the particular landscape that they're working together in. And those are challenges that, from a relationship point of view, have always been issues that come up in terms of how interpersonal dynamics then impact the production. And managing that from the outset and having an understanding and an awareness of who your partner actually is and being able to work with them at that very basic human level requires a level of emotional maturity in order to advance the project. And I think we've been fortunate. We've had Alfons as a co-production partner with a great degree of emotional intelligence. But then we have also had instances where people have just been resistant to taking direction, to navigating the landscape. And that's been one of the big challenges in all the co-productions we've done, particularly with partner companies from, I think, the UK and America. They have a very particular paradigm in terms of how things ought to be done, how the story structure should unfold. And by and large, you kind of have to defer to them because in most instances, they're bringing the largest percentage of the investment to the table. And so there is a measure of inequality in that relationship. And like Bev was saying, it's something that we often, as South Africans, have to assert in that space. And it's a bitter, hard lesson to learn because you have to accept that people don't just give ground. You have to claim that ground. But the way you do it is important. I think you have to do it with respect and consideration for the other party's understanding of where they're coming from. And I think if we can navigate those issues in the co-production relationship, then you probably overcome 80% of the challenges that you face.
Yeah, and you know what? Mr. Cooter used in our meet and greet, so the first day that the Canadian delegations came in, we met with some local creators, and he used the analogy of a wedding. So our relationship, but obviously the relationship gets further and it gets into a wedding. So you can decide, to meet somebody today and get married tomorrow. It doesn't mean that this wedding is going to be strong because what is going to be, is it going to be built on rock or is it going to be built on sand? So build on sand if you get married tomorrow, maybe build on rock if you decide to spend a couple of months or hopefully a couple of years to get to know each other and then to get married. So in terms of co-production, if we were to use that analogy and based on what you just said, that everything has to be, not everything, but you try to discuss as much things as possible from the onset of the relationship.
Yeah.
What could be key questions, or how do you do it? Do you just go for a coffee? Do you do this over a month? Do you try to know what the people, what they think of the world, their worldviews? Because I know that some people, I wouldn't be able to connect with them just based on their worldviews.
Yeah.
So what do you think?
Well, first thing is it's a marriage, it's a good prenup agreement. And I have that here somewhere. And basically, because I think it's important, I put on my producer's hat instead of the director's hat, even though I wouldn't suggest doing both unless you're a Gemini, which I am. It's two different sides of your brain. But I think it's important to understand the agreement, okay? And what I have here is, it's called the short form letter of understanding for a co-production agreement. And basically, I've outlined 10 points that should be discussed between the partners to really have a good understanding of how you're going to, divide the concept, the length of them. These are details. What percentage of financing each is bringing to the table. I won't go through them all, but there's, how do you split the revenues? Those kind of nitty-gritty things should also after you've developed the story and realized the story you want to tell and how you want to tell it, I think it's important to get to the prenup really soon, so that you're not way down the road and you said, "Whoa, wait a minute! I thought this was 60% South African," and the Canadian's saying, "Well, no, I thought it was 80% Canadian." So some of these 10 questions or 10 paragraphs outline what the agreement could be between you, and this is a great way to discuss. And it actually becomes an official document at the end of the day, because both the, I guess, the NFEF here and Telefilm in Canada will say, well, what are you basing this official co-pro on? And this will be the document that you start with, which is a letter of cooperation. And then this will be, by your lawyers, it'll be extrapolated into a full term agreement between the two of you that has to be ratified or accepted by both the NFVF and Telefilm Canada as an official co-production. So these points become very important. So anyway, that's
interesting.
From the technical side,
Yeah.
that's, I think, really important discussion to have.
Yeah, and I can just imagine, are there any people that you don't have to lift your hand, but answer within yourself? You're someone maybe who lacks self-confidence. You're someone who maybe you don't like conflicts. So you were all excited to get into a potential agreement with someone, and then at some point you're like, eesh, I don't think I want to go on, but I don't know how to tell that person. Just like in a marriage. Maybe not the marriage, before the marriage, right? We hope it's before the marriage. So Beverley, what would you say to someone who is in the audience right now and who could be in a situation where they really wanted to do business with someone, maybe they felt like they went too far with their verbal intentions, and now they want to retract from that. So how do you think we should go about it?
Well, I suppose go for counseling. I would say that's where the organizations like the IPO and the Canadian Producers Organization come in, is that you're going to need someone to arbitrate, because especially if you're coming from a position of low self-esteem and you don't feel that you are able to engage in a way, some people actually even don't like to engage because they become confrontational, they become violent, So I would suggest if you find yourself in a situation where the marriage is not really working, is approach your organizations in your respective countries and say, I would like you to arbitrate and intervene on our behalf, and that you have a sit down where you can actually work it out in an amiable way where both parties actually walk away from it without any negativity.
Yeah, and that being said, we're talking about the business side of it, because obviously you can do creative things, but if you don't understand the business, it's bound to fail. So as an executive, you have decades of experience in both, like you were saying, I was saying in the beginning, in the international and African media environment. What is your role when you work with young creators in order to make them understand the business side of things for them to thrive and have success with their projects?
I think the first thing is to make them understand IP. A lot of young people don't understand their rights with regard to their own intellectual property. And then assisting them because in South Africa we've had to do a paradigm shift from people that are used to being commissioned by broadcasters or streamers or institutions, and understanding how they need to develop a financial understanding of how they package so what I've largely done is I would take a project, develop it to a point where we can take it to market, and then do that breakdown of, okay, so how much percentage are you doing a pre-sale? Who are you doing the pre-sale to? So taking them through those basic steps of how to sort of put the finance together for this specific production.
Okay. And Sarolta or anyone else, if you want to jump in, when we talk about co-productions between Canada and South Africa, obviously the experience on the ground is going to be different from a youth that was born in South Africa compared to someone in Canada. And even within Canada and within South Africa, there are hundreds or if not millions of experiences. So what are the tools, or how can we foster a love for the craft for these youth that are coming up in order for them to aspire to maybe do co-production at some point with other countries like Canada while remaining authentically themselves. You know, by not trying to be the, sometimes I'll say like the other country, or trying to create narratives that will please the other country and not staying true to themselves.
Well, one example is if you look at what's happening even in Korea with Squid Games, for instance.
Absolutely.
That's a very popular, I think it plays here, probably. They kept their culture,
Yeah.
you know. I think it's even in their language, unless you have a dubbed version. And it's an amazing story that they're telling, and it was very successful, even though they stayed true to their way of storytelling.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's important when I, came here and you realize South Africans, sometimes they have a different way of getting to the point or to the story, which is true. And I think sometimes that is what makes the originality. That's what people like when I'm listening to them, is the way they're telling the story, which at first it's different, but then it's sort of unique in the way it's presented. And I think that is what makes it endearing to other cultures as well. So I think it's important not to come in and say, to force your way of telling a story, because I come from North America, we sell stuff to Hollywood, we know how to tell the story, because that just becomes a kind of homogenous kind of story, really. Acceptable, yes, and you can sell it here and there and, make a relatively good living at selling those types of stories. But if you want to have a unique story, I think you have to listen to the way that the stories are being told here, because they have a lot to offer, and I think that's what's really important when you go into this college, different cultures, is to have that experience, and that'll make you stand out. We talked about that. And a lot of the storytellers here have that intrinsically in their storytelling, because it reflects who they are and their worldview and just the way they express themselves. So, don't try to dampen that and say, no, let's just do it this way. It's acceptable to my broadcaster or my audience. Let those things breathe, have the flexibility. And on the technical side, I think we also have to be flexible with our partners, in the business side, in the sense that when we come from Canada, we have all the rights to our material, etc. And what I found with my partners here, some of them don't have all the IP rights.
Yeah.
My partners here, they didn't own their IP rights. I owned all of mine, and so I'm wondering, who am I working with? I said, well, who owns them? Well, the broadcaster.
Yeah.
So the broadcaster comes to the table and says, well, no, actually, it's us and you.
Yeah.
And what happened to my GoPro partners?
Yeah.
So what we did as Canadians is we fought for them to get some of the IP. We said, no, that's not fair, because, we're working with them. And so then the broadcasters here started to say, okay, well, it's not the way we do things.
Yeah.
But we'll give them a percentage. So we fought to have our, I know these are two different things, but I think they're important. I fought for the South African partners to have some of that IP.
Yeah.
And that opens a door where, well, yes, definitely. And I guess that opens a door about if you're in that relationship, how honest are you to one another? And you realize that I'm not talking money yet.
Yeah.
I'm really on the human side of things, because if you want to build co-production, obviously it's so hard. Filmmaking is hard. Co-production is harder. So if you want to build that relationship, you might as well work it so it lasts for the next 50 years, right?
Yeah.
So why not start strong? So saying that, and I'd love maybe to dig deeper into what you just said, and you can add up Sarolta and Quinton. So now you fought for the South Africans to get their IP, at least a percentage of these IPs. What was next? How did it change or shift the relationship between you and those co-producers?
Well, they then had the power. They were at the table.
Yeah.
That's
Because
it.
it was odd to just be doing the story with them and all of the growth that we did with them. And then when it came time to really sign contracts and see exactly how the power is being distributed, to have the broadcaster on the table, and then the South African producers put aside and said, no, we actually own it with you.
That's it.
That was an odd thing. So I think it's important to empower your co-producer. You know, we're fortunate in the way, coming from Canada, that we get all the IP. We basically have, have the broadcaster licenses our production.
Yeah.
But we own it and then can sell it again in different territories around the world. But unfortunately, our South African partners, they couldn't really sell it again. It was the broadcaster who would sell it around the world and benefit. You know, so how do you build a strong industry if your producers here could not take that IP and also sell it with us around the world and reap the benefits from that?
For them.
They shouldn't go to the broadcaster. They should be licensed. So it's it's difficult, but I think you've got to help fight with your South African counterpart or international counterpart, depending on the situation, to have equal rights with you. We fought for them to have 50%. That did not work, but they certainly had a piece of rights.
Anything you want to add before I move to Sarolta and about empowering producers? Quickly.
Yeah, I think South African producers are largely a battered species. I mean, I'm sure many of you are sitting here in the audience and you know it's an uphill battle to try and own your own IP, you know, because here we have draconian legislation that goes back to the 1950s, where once the broadcaster gives you the money, they own everything. And I woke up one morning and realized I've been making programs for 30 years and I own nothing, you know. And that's when I had to start shifting my paradigm in terms of saying, no, so what is the route to go to actually own the stories that I want to tell, you know? And one of the routes is co-production, you know, and raising your own finance. And I think we need to start becoming braver as South African producers. And take the fights which the Canadians have done, which the British have done. They've had to fight the BBC, they've had to fight the CBC to get a percentage of the IP, and we should be doing that as well.
And you, Quinton, you want to add something to this?
I mean, this is a very contentious issue in our landscape at the moment with the Copyright Amendment Bill as an attempt to address that archaic IP regime. And although the intention by the state is noble, the devil is in the detail. And I think that that's where the challenge lies, is that it is not an easy gain to own your own IP and to monetize it, because the landscape that you have to navigate as an independent creative or producer is fraught with all kinds of challenges, financing being one of them. But just the legal expertise to guide you is prohibitively expensive in South Africa for most independent filmmakers, irrespective of whether you're black or white. You know, I mean, there's a few entertainment lawyers that can guide you and advise you on these processes, and it's something that we as the IPO have been lobbying for, is for greater support for our creators and our producers to be able to navigate that legal minefield when it comes to both the cost implications, but also understanding the consequence of agreements that you enter into, whether with a broadcaster or a streamer or a distributor. And I think the business landscape in South Africa is significantly more challenging, particularly for smaller black-owned producers and creatives, in that there are so many barriers to entry that you have to overcome. You know, if you want to go and pre-sell your film, you're looking at $500,000 at least annually to travel to festivals and markets.
Yeah.
And like, who's got that kind of money? And so, you know, it's all of those kinds of issues that we've highlighted to the state to say that if you're saying we want to build a sustainable industry in the creative industries economy, then what kind of support? We've had the adoption of the Creative Industries Master Plan by Cabinet last year, which has been years in the making, but it's going to take years for the objectives to be achieved and for the resources to be allocated, because that's a whole nother negotiation with Treasury against other more pressing, urgent needs in the South African landscape. And it's all of those issues that come to bear when it comes to empowering producers and creatives to monetize their IP.
Beverley. Thank you, Quinton. I see the time. Well, we're going to take some time, some minutes now. You opened the door about, exchanging between the two countries. No, you talk about the challenges in terms of what the producers face. And the challenges are both in South Africa, different ones in Canada. So the CMPA, you're there obviously to support, to advocate on behalf of Canadians who are in the industry. So what are the programs or what do you have in place that helps producers, strive better, or in terms of mentoring and all that, in order for them, to strive better, and even being here today, because we have 30 people from Canada in the delegations, 23 companies. So what is being done at the CMPA?
So the CMP provides support to its membership base through a number of different departments and initiatives. It goes from negotiating collective agreements to lobbying government. And what we are talking about here today specifically is we organize international opportunities for our members where, like you were saying, we brought together with the Black Screen Office 24 Canadian companies that are here attending Filmmaker Africa. In terms of mentorship and training, we have a number of professional development opportunities as well as mentorship programs that provide long-term exposure at a production company. That is also paid internship, not unpaid, so that's very important for us, for everyone to get paid for their work. So those are just some of the things that the CMPA does as a national organization to support our producers across the country.
And about a year ago, the CMPA and the IPO have been talking to see how can they work together, how can they better work together in order to support their respective members. So in a nutshell, tell us, where you are now in terms of these discussions, because this is a strong example of how two countries and two organizations can work together in order to better serve their members.
Yeah, so Quinton and I started talking about a year ago, like you said, just to figure out how we can bring the two organizations or respecting memberships together. So today we are very excited that we will be signing a memorandum of understanding that broadly outlines how we will be collaborating in the future. And it's really about, so how we provide access to each other's membership base, how we support incoming and outgoing delegations in the two countries. We are also talking about potential training opportunities together, but then again, this is just really the first step. So this is just to outline or put in writing that that there is a spirit of collaboration, and then really the work really just starts from here.
That's awesome. Yes, can we applaud this again? And the reason why I'm saying that those types of collaborations are very important is because you started talking a year ago, but then this mission happened because of our different partners, so Telefilm, Canadian Heritage, Global Affairs, which the High Commission falls under Global Affairs, and because they're here on South African soil, they were able to meet, and then further that discussion, online, and then we're going to be doing the signing here. So in terms of the needs that you see on the South African perspectives, how do you think South Africans are going to gain from that relationship, and vice versa? What do you think Canadians are going to gain from that relationship? I know not everything, but if you think of one or two aspects that are strong.
Not one or two.
There's a lot.
No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, I think this is quite a momentous occasion for us because we, as the Independent Producers Organization, we are a membership-based organization. And, we have tiers of membership, and our industry was very badly impacted by COVID. And so our members, obviously, from a business point of view, were adversely affected by that. And we have major capacity constraints when it comes to lobbying and advocacy, being able to do research on different pieces of policy and legislation, and to have business mentorship and linkages that overcome these barriers of entry to the marketplace for smaller production houses, and particularly black female-owned production houses. So the MOU between us and the CMPA, facilitated by the Canadian government, represents an opportunity for us to begin to address some of those challenges in a practical way. Because having that access to a partner in a territory like Canada is a major market opportunity for many of our members who struggle to access other territories and markets. And then also those business linkages, because fostering those business linkages requires an investment in terms of time and energy and money. And having a partner that can facilitate that is invaluable. And I think that the real benefit in terms of quantifiable dividends will only realize in the next 3 to 5 years. But the benefits to building the capacity of our independent producers and creatives through this MOU are significant. And I think government in South Africa is going to sit up and take notice in no uncertain terms.
Beverley, I don't know if there's anything you want to add to what do you think this type of collaboration how it will support members of the IPO?
Just in terms of the creative process, I think it would be amazing to be able to draw on the expertise of story consultants, script editors, people that understand how you structure a first season of a series. I think that for me is very exciting, is that we're able to draw on people that have been doing this for the last 30, 40 years, So for me, in terms of the creative process, I also would like us to have that kind of collaboration from ideation already, rather than that we've already got the scripts, let's do a co-production.
Sure. And for you, Sarolta, what do you think will be the benefits for the members in that, but in that business relationship with the IPO?
So part of it, I think, is just having access to like a wide range of different stories that and storytellers that may be new to Canadian producers. The other thing that I think is exciting for our members, just through South Africa, to have more of an introduction to other countries on the continent. And
okay. And for you, what do you think?
Well, I think that, first of all, I wanted to say that Sarolta is very sort of softly spoken, but she represents a very powerful group in the IPO. When Netflix came to Canada, it was the IPO, CMPA, getting them mixed up, that basically told the government, they should be chipping in to Canadian production. And that went to government, and all of those types of issues they bring before our government.
Yeah.
And so that bill is just being passed, or just been passed, that they will chip into Canadian production. So I just want to say that is a great job, and they were very powerful. So I think that there could a lot be learned from that kind of association. I also wanted to mention the Black Screen Office.
Yeah.
I think we got Joan, she represents them, and she brought the diverse filmmakers that many of you have met to this event. And I think that is also another very important organization. They do everything from script development again and skills exchange. So they're developing a lot of things across the country in Canada for the diverse filmmakers. And considering where we are, that's a very important, I think, group for you to be in touch with and to liaise with.
Can I just comment on that? The audiovisual white paper that is currently under consideration has now included, based on that international model in Denmark and Canada and other countries, that international streamers should actually be contributing to a national film fund, like in Denmark, where they've legislated 2% of net profit after tax. And I think that our government sometimes moves slowly, but they do learn from international experience, and that is now going to be part of the audiovisual white paper and become official government policy. So that level of accountability, but also responsibility, is something that the state has recognized in the policies and the legislation that is being tabled at the moment.
Thank you so much, Quinton. After my comment, I'll be taking maybe 3 or 4 questions all at the same time, and then I'll ask the panelists to answer them in a concise manner, because I know that we could have a whole other panel with the questions. Like I said earlier, there are 30 people that came from Canada, including 23 companies and 6 institutions. And if you didn't come to our pavilion yet, the Canadian pavilion, please do so, because there have been business meetings back to back to back of producers who saw the Canadian profiles and vice versa, Canadian producers who saw South African profiles and who wanted to meet for co-production opportunities potentially. And our booth has been running right now with events, with meetings, sorry. So we're so happy about that. And hopefully in the next few years, we'll see projects coming out from this Fame Montreal, I would say Fame Montreal. Maybe you should come to Montreal to Fame here. So whoever has questions, it's time. I know we're running late because we started late, so I'll take 3 questions before we conclude. Anyone has a question? Yes, my dear. We have a microphone right here.
Good afternoon.
It's
Can you hear me?
not, okay,
Yeah.
sorry,
Okay, good
go
afternoon,
ahead.
everyone. I'm Nasipa Mngube. I'm a news producer.
Just a little
Can you hear me?
louder.
Louder.
Yes.
Okay, I'm Nasipa Mngube. I'm a news producer, and I just was interested in knowing if any of the panelists have any deal breakers or non-negotiables that they've developed over the years with regard to their co-producers' core values and beliefs, because I'm new to learning about co-production, so I would feel as though matters such as finances would be a lot easier to negotiate, whereas someone's personality and who they are and their beliefs, that's just who they are, that's harder to negotiate. So have you developed any deal breakers or non-negotiables in that regard? And if you've been able to look past those in the interest of telling the story, how do you navigate that without kind of losing yourself and staying true to the story that you're trying to tell and staying true to yourself? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, is there another question? We'll answer them all at the same time. No other question? Okay, so you want to go first? We'll go like this.
That's a very difficult question. I've actually had experience where we had a divorce, because of I wouldn't compromise my ethos and my sort of understanding of how I wanted to tell the story and just culturally. So I would like to hear if anyone else managed to sort that out, but I looked at the situation and I realized we didn't have the IPO, we didn't have any arbitration. I was probably going to hit the person, so I thought before I get arrested for violence, I walked away. So I don't have an answer for you.
Okay. And your second question was, how do you navigate through? Okay,
Yeah,
do overlook
overlook
it.
it.
How do you navigate?
yeah.
Perfect. Sarolta?
Well, to that, I would say don't overlook it.
Yeah.
Just don't. Like,
Walk
when,
away.
when it feels like you get that little voice, like, I'm not
Yeah.
really sure if this is working out, then just don't do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So your gut feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Follow your gut feeling.
Well, I'll go back to the marriage analogy. If you have one saying, yeah, I want to have kids, and the other one saying, well, I don't really want to have kids, but let's move ahead.
How do you do
That could be difficult in a few years' time. So I think that's partly what this is about, my prenup here, the 10 points, because that allows you to kind of agree or disagree on things that are it helps bring things out of the woodwork that would maybe separate you or bring you together. But I don't think one should move forward ultimately if you
yeah.
don't feel that you're really getting your stuff told, because it'll just get worse as you later on. Yeah.
And Quinton, you have something to say? And then we'll take the last 2 questions.
Yeah, I think the most important thing is for you to know when your integrity
Yeah.
and sense of self potentially is being compromised in that relationship. The minute I feel uncomfortable in a dynamic like that, I walk away, because your integrity and your sense of self in terms of your value system is all you've got ultimately. Forget the money, forget the status, the recognition. You know, if I can't look at myself in the mirror and know that I've behaved with the utmost integrity in any of the relationships I've entered into, then that's not who I want to be. And that's all I can say to you is, you know, the minute you feel like that's happening, I would suggest that you reconsider at a fundamental level.
Is that okay? Yeah, perfect. So, sir, the microphone, please. Where is it?
Where's the microphone?
It's coming. Thank you. So the last two questions, and then we'll wrap up.
There's one here.
This,
too.
Yeah, this gentleman here.
Yeah, you can go ahead, and we'll give the microphone to the
Alfons, I just wanted to know, where do you get your piece of paper with the 10 points?
You want a piece of paper with the 10 points?
I'd love to have a copy of your
This
piece of
is
paper
yours,
with the 10
right
points.
here. Come and take it.
So we'll take a. You come and take a picture. Those who want it.
No, I got a couple.
Yeah.
Cool.
Perfect.
Thank you.
There he is. It's here. Thank you.
I actually wanted the same piece of paper.
Okay.
Yes, no, I have some more.
Oh, he has some more. So you
I
come
have
and
a few.
see him.
Yeah.
It's gonna be $100. No, it's not true. There's the last question here.
Sorry, I'm on the piece of paper, but I just had a question, probably more on the technical skills, because Canada's got really strong.
Can you put the microphone?
Hello,
Thank you.
Canada's got really good technical skills.
Yeah.
Anything from entry level to, you know, cinematographers, visual effects. Is this part of the producing conversation that we're talking about?
Absolutely.
Is it? Okay.
So one of the things that we've been discussing with the CMPA is the exchange of skills.
Exactly.
Because we know that that's a deficit in our industry here, and particularly for black professionals. Access to getting that opportunity to acquire that level of technical skill that allows you to work on an international production requires recognition. And so Warren sitting here in the second row can attest to that, how long it's taken him to get to the point where he is now a consulting art and set designer to Netflix on some of their biggest productions. And we've worked together for the last, 15 years on different productions. And so acquisition of that technical skills is a priority in terms of that exchange and mentorship between the CMPA and the IPO membership base.
Yeah.
I just wanted to add that, you know, it kind of goes both ways, because earlier on, a lot of the skills exchange went from Canada to South Africa.
Exactly.
But in my last film, I brought the gaffer and the grip, who were people of color from South Africa, to Canada, and they were leading because they had done things like Mad Max.
Yeah.
So they came over and were showing our guys, okay, here's how you do the big stuff. Okay.
Yeah.
And we actually, Warren came over as well, and he was leading the design team on the last production. So he came to Canada as well. So the exchange goes both ways. There's a lot of skills here that you have from the international productions that have been done. So I just wanted to add that. It's not a one-way street.
And what we have to remember is that it has to be mutually beneficial. It has to be on equal level. So this is what we really want. And when we talk about exchange, we talk about expertise, experiences, culture, obviously, and skills. So this is what's going to conclude this panel discussion. Thank you so much for being here. Beverley, Sarolta, Alfons, and Quinton. So my name is Dorothy. I hope you have a great end of the day. Don't forget to come to our pavilion, the Canada Pavilion, and the signing of the MOU is going to happen in a few minutes between the IPO and CMPA. So please applaud them again, and thank you for being here.